He's entitled to 134 days of sentence credit from January 10th, 2019 to May 24th, 2019. Former Attorney General Janet Reno once said, "The keystone to justice is the belief that the legal system treats all fairly." Bobby Kennedy once said, "The glory of justice and the majesty of law are created not just by the Constitution, nor by the courts, nor by the officers of the law, nor by the lawyers, but by the men and women who constitute our society, who are the protectors of the law as they are themselves protected by the law." Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both." A great quote I read said, "Let's not forget that the purpose of the criminal justice system is both to rehabilitate and to punish. But if we can rehabilitate somebody, that is a huge win for our system." Charlie's favorite president, Abraham Lincoln, once said, "I've always found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice." It's been a hard case for us. We began this case, I drugged Charlie into this case. He had just had a knee replacement surgery. And we end this case 3 days ago. I attended the funeral of Charlie's mother. It's been a tough case for us along the way. It's been a tough case for our client, for his family, for Jayme, and for her family. It's been a tough case for District Attorney Wright. We've taken this case very seriously. We're thankful to Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and his staff. They have been extraordinary to us, to Jake, and to Jake's family. We're thankful to Polk County and Dunn County jails for their professionalism and the way they treated our client. Judge, we're thankful that you left the doors open so that we and Attorney Wright could work through whatever issues. But when it's all said and done, you have to balance those factors I shared with you, and you have to decide what's best for all. The Constitution of the United States of America is the second greatest document ever written. And it's a phrase that has resonated in my heart since I was a little boy and I decided that this was the profession for me. That phrase, with liberty and justice for all. Jake Patterson told us on January 13th that he was never getting out. Two very seasoned attorneys know that Jake Patterson is never getting out. But no homicide has ever proceeded so quickly through the system. No case of this magnitude has ever been handled so expeditiously. No defendant has ever moved at this rate of speed to resolve a case. So the issue of whether he has taken responsibility, I need the record to be clear. When Charlie and I started practicing law in the late 80s, early 90s, we were trained that it is ineffective assistance of counsel to allow a client to plead guilty to first-degree intentional homicide without a plea agreement on the table. When Jake decided to plead guilty, there was no plea agreement on the table. So based upon what we were taught and trained, we were going to try this case. The only reason we didn't try this case and its 20 terabytes of discovery is because Jake Patterson would not allow us to. He saved this county the cost of housing him in the county jails any longer. He saved the county the cost of a jury, of a sequestered jury from another county for 3 to 6 weeks or maybe longer. And he saved all the families the anguish of a trial. He has rehabilitative needs. And for those reasons, Your Honor, we make the following request for a sentence. As to count 1, first-degree intentional homicide, we request the court sentence Jake to life, but to give him a extended supervision date in the year 2072. 2072, Jake will be about 75 years old. We request that the court give Jake the same sentence as to count 2 concurrently. As to count 3, we request that the court sentence Jake to the maximum of 25 years initial confinement and 15 years extended supervision. At that time, Jake will be 100 years old. His life expectancy is not 100 years old, is not 100 years. In other words, as he told us on January 13th, as we've known throughout the course of this case, he would die in prison. But that sentence gives him a chance to work on his issues, to somewhat be rehabilitated, to have some level of respect and quality within the prison system, to get the services that he needs, and that the goal of rehabilitation attached to a sentence of punishment affords him and that he's entitled to. Thank you.
Mr. Patterson, is there anything you wish to tell the court before I impose sentence?
Yeah. I'll just say that I would do like absolutely anything to take back what I did, you know. I would die. I would do absolutely anything to bring them back, you know. I don't care about me, I'm just so sorry. That's all.
That's it, Your Honor.
That's
Thank
it?
you. Yes, sir.
I would start out to the family of James, Denise, and Jayme Kloss. You know, it'd be inaccurate for me to say that I understand what you're going through. The magnitude of these crimes is difficult, if not impossible, to comprehend. All I can really say is I'm sorry for what you have endured. I would be remiss if I did not emphasize what has been obvious, and it's been spoken today in some manner, that James and Denise Kloss did what good parents do. Everything they could do, even giving up their lives to protect their daughter on the night she was kidnapped. As I read the victim impact statements that were contained in the pre-sentence investigation and what I heard today, I wrote down some phrases that were contained in those statements, such as horrifying memory, one big living nightmare, lives ripped apart, could not grieve properly with Jayme missing. You know, I wish that the justice system could make you whole again. I wish we could go back in time to make sure that James and Denise Kloss were never murdered, nor Miss Kloss kidnapped. But I and the system can't do that for you. At best, it is my hope that today's hearing will bring you some bit of closure to this awful nightmare, and perhaps some return of a sense of safety and security. A number of years ago, I read a book. It's a historical fiction novel called A Thread of Grace by Mary Doria Russell. And it's about the Nazis committing multiple atrocities against Italians and Jews in the latter years of World War II. And near the end of that book, there's a rabbi who is one of the main participants in the novel. And he said there's a saying in Hebrew: no matter how dark the tapestry God weaves for us, there's always a thread of grace. And the rabbi pointed out that in Italy, the thread of grace was that many Italians risked their lives to save almost 50,000 Jews from the Nazis. And in this particular nightmare, in this dark tapestry, the thread of grace is that for 88 days, when Miss Jayme Kloss was missing, her family and the community joined together to search for her in their shared hope that she was still alive. Mr. Jones, one of my favorite phrases is liberty and justice for all. It's on a frame poster as I walk into the courtroom every day. And I point that out because that's what I'm here for, is to see that justice is done. I have considered the pre-sentence investigation, and I'm going to give some facts from it in a bit. The statements of the victims, both written and oral. The statement of Mr. Patterson, the arguments of counsel. Wisconsin law requires me to consider three main factors. The first being the gravity of the offense and the nature of the offense. First-degree intentional homicide is the most serious crime under Wisconsin law. Mr. Patterson, you intentionally murdered two innocent parents, parents trying to protect their daughter. You did so in a way that you forcibly and violently entered their house and kidnapped Ms. Kloss. And I know, Mr. Jones, you talked about our Constitution. The Fourth Amendment guarantees everyone in our country the sanctity and safety of their homes. That is one of those rights that we hold sacrosanct. It is paramount in our country. And not even police can go into someone's home without a judge giving them that permission. And so when we talk about constitutional rights, that was a right that you violated of these people. And not only is it a right under the Constitution and under our law, but you also stole a sense of security from this family. In fact, one of the things Ms. Kloss wrote in her statement was that loss of safety, even though she is back with her family. That she can't be home where you're supposed to be safe. That's where she'd like to be. And I consider that an aggravating factor. I also consider as an aggravating factor that you planned this, you had a mask, you stole a license plate so that you could not be discovered. I consider as an aggravating factor is that you murdered Ms. Kloss's parents within feet of her or right next to her. There's been discussion of your character. It is clearly unusual for me to have someone come to court for any crime, much less a serious crime, and have no prior record. You have no criminal record, you have no juvenile record. You have no history of drug and alcohol issues. There's no evidence that you are under the influence of any alcohol and drugs. The PSI notes that you have what I would say alarmingly distorted views. The PSI writer says antisocial cognitions. For all of this, I have no idea if there's any treatment. I heard what your lawyer said about the psychiatrist or psychologist who met with you. I don't know how he came to any of his conclusions. I've never seen his report. But your actions and the ideas that you had are not normal. They are shockingly not normal. I have no idea what rehabilitation could be provided for you. No one suggested any rehabilitation because even from your own side, the doctors can't find anything wrong with you. I want to talk about the need to protect the public. I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years and a judge for the last 16 years, almost entirely in this county. And these crimes rank as the most heinous and dangerous that I have seen either here or anywhere else in the state of Wisconsin and perhaps the United States. When I read the complaint and when I've had hearings here, it would be an understatement to say that I was shocked by the brutalness, and I've seen lots of crimes in my career. And I thought they were shocking enough, but sadly I was wrong. The pre-sentence gives me a great deal of information about statements you made either in writing or orally. Some statements, as I understand it, were taken from your jail cell. No one else has mentioned them today, but I have to, because it makes a big difference in how I impose sentence. But I'm told through the pre-sentence investigation, I'm going to read from this, I started having bad thoughts all the time. Fantasies about keeping a young girl prisoner, torturing her, and totally controlling her. At first I fought them. I had no reason to live, and doing this was the only thing I wanted, but I was Christian. Fear of hell was the only thing that was stopping me. After a while, I stopped believing in God and I stopped fighting my fantasies. I thought about it every day. This was the summer of 2018. Now I was just waiting for an opportunity. I drove around a lot, just trying to get lucky and see a girl alone. After a while, I knew that wouldn't work. I thought of how I could get away with kidnapping a girl. My biggest problem was always witnesses. I could control what I left behind as far as evidence, but not who saw me. That's when I thought of a home invasion kidnapping at night. I hadn't decided if I would kill the parents or just tie them up. It wasn't a moral problem. If I knew I killed them, it would get a lot more attention. But if I let them live there, if I left them live, there would be good witnesses. I finally decided it didn't matter how much attention it got. If I left no evidence or witnesses, it didn't matter if they sent 1,000 FBI agents if they had nothing to go on. Before I did this, I planned on taking multiple girls, killing multiple families. I wanted to treat them differently, play mind games with them. I also just wanted to scare people. I hated everyone, but no one in particular. Everyone I actually know I liked, but I hated society as a whole. I didn't care if I died. If I could get away with having the girl for a week, it was worth dying for. When I saw Jayme, I instantly thought she would be a good target. Actually, mostly she was the first girl I saw once I had those ideas in my head. Mr. Patterson, not only were you a danger to the Kloss family, not only were you a danger to the Kloss family, you are an extreme danger to the public in general. There is no doubt in my mind that you are one of the most dangerous men to ever walk on this planet. There is talk of your remorse, but as the agent points out in the PSI, there's a difference between regret and remorse. Regret means you're sorry that you're caught. Remorse means you have empathy for the victims. I have no doubt that you have regret, and I have no doubt that you have no remorse. The overriding factor in this sentencing is the protection of the public. The rest of the public deserves liberty and justice. You have had long-term thoughts prior to committing these crimes, including kidnapping multiple girls, killing multiple families, and keeping a young girl prisoner. You are the embodiment of evil, and the public can only be safe if you are incarcerated until you die. Consequently, regarding count 1, the court is imposing, regarding the first-degree intentional homicide of James Kloss, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the eligibility for release on extended supervision. I am granting 134 days of credit already served. On count 2, the first-degree intentional homicide of Denise Kloss, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the eligibility for release on extended supervision, consecutive to count 2. And on count 1. And on count 3, on the kidnapping of Miss Kloss, I sentence you to the maximum of 40 years in the Wisconsin State Prisons with 25 years initial incarceration and 15 years of extended supervision, consecutive to counts 1 and 2. I also further order the mandatory lifetime registration pursuant to section 301.45 and 939.615 of the Wisconsin statutes. I order the mandatory DNA sample and court costs. I designate Dodge Correctional as the reception center. Mr. Wright, is there anything you believe I've overlooked?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Glynn or Mr. Jones, anything you believe I've overlooked today?
We're going to admonish you as to comment.
Right. Mr. Patterson, under Wisconsin law, because you're convicted of the felonies, you may not vote in this state, and you may not possess any firearms. I will give your lawyers written copies. They'll go through those with you down in the jail. Anything else? And then we'll send the appellate rights down too, so you can go through it with them. We'll give you those documents. All right, we're adjourned.